Okay, so I'm going to talk about the analysis phase, which is actually something that you have to write in your interim report and submit. So you will be wondering whether this is too late to hear about the analysis phase. My personal opinion, that's not. The interim report, the purpose of interim report is to give you a chance to revise yourself whether you are on really track or not. Even the analysis you may have finished, but you may have to revisit if there are some things missing that you may discover sometimes later in the project, probably in the design or implementation stage. So I will talk about the analysis phase based on my experience and the way we have expected in the BIT program, and hope that will help you to improve what you have done already. Interim report is not the final version. You can improve it before you include those content in the final presentation. So you may have finished analysis phase, but hope that will be helpful to improve what you have done. So here is the brief outline, what is expected in the analysis phase, investigation about the problem and the context. So simply, the what is defined, the problem is actually the thing that you can see at the beginning of the project. Then you come with the scope, and the scope is an rough thing. This may be the thing that I will do. It's some kind of an area. And it is vacuum, it is not 100% clear, because it's at the very beginning of the project. But when it goes to the analysis phase, you have to dig the problem, and then you have to really identify what you really have to do with it. So this is the requirement analysis goes, and then the picture of the scope will be much more clear. When you go to the design, it will go to the much more clear. There was a question, how can I judge whether the scope is enough or not? Well, there is no formula. Okay? First thing is, you have to read other people's work, the dissertations. Without knowing the other people's work, how you design the scope is to go on. We have defined as 300 hours of work as the required number of hours that you need to complete your project. But if you are not good in programming, and if you have to spend a lot of time, if you are not good in some skills, you may need 900 hours. This 300 is an average figure what we have estimated at the beginning as a number. So we do expect when you come to the third year, you are very good in the programming, you are very good in the analysis, you have done software engineering, system analysis, and all these subjects. The main expectation in the project module is to see whether you can practically apply what you have learned during the first year second. So this is the part of things. So if there is a difficulty, that means there is something that you have to revisit and learn again. Okay, so in that case, of course, the 300 may go further up. Okay, so what is expected? Investigation about the problem and the context. So that is the main objective in the analysis phase. Common issue in the analysis, which I will explain from the different point of view, and the requirement analysis, what's people, it's from the software engineering point of view. And analysis of the existing similar system, which is very important because we call this as a project. I think you have done in the second year, the information technology project management. So how do you define something as a project? It should be a unique problem. It should be some sort of work. That should be not a regular work. Okay? It should be a unique work that you have defined, and there is a problem which you have to investigate. The solution is not very clear. Of course, there may be a similar solutions, but a unique solution is not there. So people will have to work and achieve something again. Well, so analysis. So the projects, especially the projects which are similar to what you are doing, you have to look at as a background study. But in addition to that, what I suggest, even if you have some doubt about the scope, read some of the past dissertations. For example, dissertation which got A grade, B grade, you can access those books. And then try to see what is the difference, what is the thing which is lacking in your consideration. documenting your findings, which is very important because the dissertation is the something which is actually the very important. Of course, there was another question that 300 hours, you are asking given half an hour to present everything. Isn't that reasonable enough? That's not possible. You are talking about the 30 hours, 30 weeks of works to be presented in 30 minutes. Yeah. Demonstration presented in everything down 30 minutes. For my doctoral study, I studied 5 years. I was given 45 minutes to present what I did. That was the reality. That was the way how things are done in the examination or evaluation process. The time that you have spent is independent when it comes to the evaluation. It is your talent to present things or abstract things and present in a way that the examiners that will get an understanding that you have done some considerable work. It's a matter of communication. So most of the time people fail not because of the work they have done improperly. The main reason is the communication issue. You have to communicate in a way, a political way, conveys that you have done something. Okay? But investigation about the problem and the context. And let me go through. So there is now we have defined at the beginning the project. There is some sort of a problem. Without the problem, there is not a project. You already know. The problem you have identified with respect to the client, that's what we were talking about. If you take the client, is that problem is valid or not? Is it actually conceptual matter? So, of course, if some other person may have the similar problem, then you can change the client, but there is a rule that you have to think about. Then, after the problem, you have to define what we call the idea in the project to find solutions. To find solutions, then you have to do an investigation. You have to define your objectives. Objectives are the status to which if you reach, you can find a solution. And again, that is a variability. That's very obvious. So you have to define based on the problem, what are the things to be achieved. So if you things to be achieved, that's so-called objective, you may be able to find a solution. Then there is a rough idea that you get, okay, this is the scope. So that's the very first part. Then you have to start with investigation. The analysis phase comes. So what we call here the system requirements and the current problem. System objectives and the success factors. If the objectives are not properly defined, they may not be good success factors. This is sometimes in some projects what people find. They have a nice problem, but they don't properly identify the objectives. I'm not going to talk about everything. Good objectives should be smart objectives. So what is the smart? I think you may already know. Very measurable, specific, things like that. And again, it's not very simple things at once to identify, but it takes time. And existing systems and infrastructure. You are trying to develop a project with respect to some environment. There may be a manual system, there may be computerized systems, and you need to have to study that infrastructure, how the solution will be provided. And all these things you are doing it based on the knowledge and the experience that you have gathered during the first 2 years. And the potential solution is something that you have to propose based on the imagination, based on the things that you may consider that I will be able to find a solution for this thing. But then the organizational cultural factors, internal policies, procedures, internal politics, all these things what becomes at the domain analysis. And if you want to develop a system for the UCSC, if you don't know much about the UCSC, it is very difficult. You have to look at, not directly related to the problem that you investigate, but around the context has to be identified. And it may be better to prepare a small document. Sometimes all these documents may not be possible to include in your dissertation because there is a limit. But keep an eye, write everything what you come across. You can't keep things in mind. So project diary is a very important tool that people need to write. So the analysis phase, what are the things they encountered, and even what do things are the matters which are related to the domain analysis. So investigation about the problem and the context, is really the objectives of an analysis phase. Let me show you a small story. Developing the software. This is based on I hope many of you may have seen. So at the beginning it is political. People brings nice stories. People say, this is what is going to be done. You do the same thing in your project proposal, okay? So this is this and all these things, assuming there you will, the proposal will be accepted and the things will be there, and how the customer is explained, and your client will also be very happy, and he may have so many expectations, and then what happens is the project leader understood. So when you start trying to analyze and everything, this will be cut down to the $300 and it will be something like this now. And then what it happens really when it goes to the analysis to designs levels, well, this is the next level. Then once you go to the programming, the whole thing will get messed up and you will be on down. Okay? So you will only try to show the interface that is working. But of course, when it comes to the demonstration or the explain the client as a consultant or as the solution, that's you do the politician's job. Okay, and then when it comes to the dissertations, this is what will be there. And when it really comes to the what is really installed on the machine, it's there. But of course, what your client, well, this is nothing to do with the budgeting, but of course the budget with respect to the time is there. But actually what really the client is expected, you will understand at the end. So always this misunderstanding is there. This is why we are talking about the software crisis. In the software engineering, I hope you know that. So there is always a problem of understanding the requirements what really comes. Not only with respect to the doing the project, but also with respect to how to do the project. It's also an issue. That's why you already have. Because we know that very little people read in the project guideline. How many of you have read the guideline? Can you raise your hands? But I know the majority of the people have not. So, but there are things we every year we try to improve and incorporate. But this is a part of the communication gap what we have. So if I summarize what might happen and if it goes wrong in the requirement analysis, and because this is very issue with regard to you have to get this client certificate at the end. Okay, so if the guy didn't agree to give you the certificate, there will be an issue that they will come to the convincing date. So it's again the political. So trying to convince him and get things, and also you'll have to convince the project examination board to get the approval. Well, I'll go into the details since I don't have enough time. But unfortunately, this is a series of lectures usually that we do internal programs. But I'll summarize. When you talk about the analysis phase, what we really do, there are four main things, main sub-phases in the analysis phase. First one, requirement elicitation, or what we simply call gathering of the requirements. This is what you start from the very beginning. Whenever you encounter something very important with regard to write it down. Okay, keep the one. And then the requirement analysis or modeling. So that is the thing. Once you know some of the things, you will start working on the analyzing it. So there are different ways. Now there is another thing. If you decided at the very beginning to follow the object-oriented approach, then there are some guidelines and some recommendations to better choose the object-oriented approach. For example, use case modeling approach is the most suitable if you follow the object-oriented approach. But that is not a rule. Of course, I still think using the DFG, you can get a data flow diagram, you can get a good view of that. You can draw that one. There is no harm of that thing. And also entity relationship diagram, ERD, which is not a class diagram, that's also show the static picture. And analysis phase, you can draw those things. Again, they don't need to be fully accurate. You just trying to sketch things, get the whole idea comes. So the requirement analysis and the modeling also should be started. Another advice is you don't want to complete one subphase to start the other phase. These two things could be started in parallel. The other one is also important, requirement documentation. All these things doesn't make any sense if there is no SRS, software requirement specification. That's what actually you need to prepare in order to get the agreement with your client. So then only, this is what I will do. This is the place really will define the scope. And in the software requirement specification, we'll have to clearly define what are the functional requirements that must be achieved as part of the project. So it's going to the more detail rather than after talking about the scope. So this documentation is not something to be done at the end. All these things could be started in parallel way, and the people can move in. And generally the people could review or try to talk with the client and get an approval about this RS, is what we call the requirement review. That could be done at last. So somewhere in the middle you can have little meetings with the people to get this one. So as an analysis phase, with respect to the system that you have to follow those four things. And there is a considerable outcome that will really provide the foundation for the successful project. Well, I will briefly summarize some of the techniques where you can do. Analyzing the documents. So people don't like to talk much, so whenever you talk with the client to do something, better to go that place. First thing is look at whether there is a similar project done in the past, but the VIT or somewhere else. And no need of hiding it. Try to analyze it and see whether it is the same thing that you are going to do or not. So most probably you will be able to find it is not the same. So try to convince that one, learn something from that one, and looks at the previous existing system and procedure manuals which are out in that particular context you will have to find out. Change request and the problem logs. So if people are talking about some of the issues, what they fail, and if there are some records, meeting minutes and things like training materials, and if there is a form, data entry forms or the reports in that organization and things like that, try to ask them whether if it's not very confident, whether they will. Some of the documents, obviously, you don't get a permission to access. That's natural, because there is a barrier for it when it comes to in a real environment. Interviews. Interviews are the things that you have to do it, but remember, the people don't like to waste time for someone else's project. But you have to build the social relationship, try to talk to it, and try to understand their problems. So, interviews, the objective, scoping, descripting, exploratory, prioritizing. So, it's the really what these people really need. That's the part you need to discuss with. And ask questions. It's not asking, probably they also don't know what really they want. And you also don't know what they really want. And then this dialogue should continue. Probably you, at this stage, you can also go to an interview with a prepared way. So, and ask questions very specific, open question, and also probing questions as a kind of an investigation about the issues. And of course, there are different types of interviews, like a structured interview, where you prepare the set of questions and you ask it. People like it because it's 10 to 15 minutes. Ask whether you can get an appointment from them, and you have a set of questions. And unstructured are kind of a casual way, where you meet the people. So that's why in the Professor Gihan mentioned, if you can find a problem in a place where you really work, that will be much more easier to do it, because in reality, doing this kind of things takes time. But that's not a requirement. Guided interviews are some sort of an investigation where you take, because remember, the people say something, do another thing. Okay? We are all politicians to some extent, so politicians are very popular. They say one thing and do another thing. So, but it's a natural human behavior. Most of the time, people do another thing. So, whatever the things they say, sometimes they could. The reality may be different. And also, if they don't object, you can use an MP3 recorder or something like that to record it. Observation is a very interview after the observation is very important, that to make sure that what you really documented. So always I remember sometimes in some students say, this is what the client asked, so I did that. Then you are not a software engineer. You are trying to ask something, but then you have to investigate whether this is really what he wants, whether this is really applicable, whether it will be good for that. And try to convince him, this is the correct way. Still, if that guy isn't not going to accept, then you can't help. But you can write that on your dissertation. You can say this. I'm helpless, I have to do because this guy is forcing me to do it, but this is not right. So it's a debatable thing, but of course, try to do the correct things and say it's a part of professional ethics. Okay, that's the what really you have to say. So if the client is wrong, you have to point it out, and of course you can declare that. And then it comes to the questionnaires, and that's another techniques where you can get the things. But remember again, this is you have very limited time. You can't have. People also don't like the questionnaires. Spend a lot of time. Now, today's context, there are lots of tools available online where you can make very short questionnaires and send an email URLs and ask people to fill. And you can quickly get the data set and complete, assuming that is in a computerized environment. Otherwise, you'll have to do the more labor work. And also look at the human aspects. They may not be happy to spend a lot of time on your project. Workshops are very good things when you have a problem, when you have a design. Good that if you can come with a little prototype, how this solution would be, looks like. And then start discussing. Even a very prototype, there are those things. You can interact with them and see. And make sure this is what really people need. Okay? So, introduction to the icebreaker. So, come at and having a kind of a small agenda and then create a good relationship with the users in the client's context, then focus on the topics, open questions, review, follow up. Well, these things I hope that you may have learned at some place, and this is the time to practice it. And there are some rules which you could adapt when you are conducting the workshop. So really it's to make sure, and this is what you really have to deliver it. Well, the discussions also, there are some guidelines. It's not the casual discussions. Of course, casual discussions also help the people, but the productive discussions are very good. So which really generate the ideas and which could really justify and analyze and summarize. So something that really makes very important. Well, why we do all these things? At the end, in the SRS and the analysis phase, we need to come up with very important stuff. Now, it is going beyond the scope that you have valuably described at the earlier stage. That is to identify functional requirements and non-functional requirements. Hope you may have studied about the theory about these two things. So simply, my functional requirement at the moment is to deliver the small presentation about the analysis phase. So that is the functional requirement. What is my non-functional requirement? If I don't do it within 30 minutes, Kadi will not be happy. He may not be able to maintain the schedule. So every requirement will have some functional, non-functional requirements. That comes with, which is not stated, which is not clearly described. So all these things are the things that may come in an indirect way. You have to be a very someone who really like a detector in order to capture all these things and also build the relationship. And if you really practice the agile approach into software development, you do that one in the morning, you go in the night to do the coding. Okay? So that is the way, the style the real programmers will do the work. If you are smart enough to do that. Smart people handle those things, even though we say it's needed 300, so those people could do it in 100 hours, but not in a way at the last moment. So how and where the people will find these functional requirements? And there are lots of resources that you can find. Well, obviously in the investigation of the data, you may identify these are possible functional requirements. And again, some of the things may not be really required. So, oh, that's okay, but better government as an ideal requirement. And also look at the whole process, what's really is happening, and through the analysis of the processing, you can also find what are possible functional facilities and features. Do you need this one? Is it something real needed? Of course, there are some of the things. So the logic is also the way things algorithmically approach. People do this and then this, and that also that helps the people to identify. User interfaces, which I am talking about based on the prototypes if you have developed, and the people may suggest system interfaces. All these things are on a rough sketch. Non-functional requirements, which will come on the later. You'll have to analyze, identify the non-functional requirements with respect to each and every functional requirements you identify. Then consider the overall system. Otherwise, that's not enough. So, if you consider all the requirements, all the functional requirements as one group, then there will be some other requirements that may come. So, this is what's really works on. For example, I put the example here, there will be a car. The functional requirement is to have a car. Well, obviously, we may think about the working engine, rotating tires and all these things, but when you start going as a vehicle, if it is emitting lots of bad things to the environment, that may be creating as a whole would be an issue. Then, what is very important? Everything we cannot be considered because we have a limited time, limited resources, and they have to convince the people, they have to finish the projects. Not only they are developing software, somehow they are writing thesis, finish all these things, and then you need to be an artistic to pick what is most suitable, what is most good. Get the client happy on that, and also that should be able to use. So important to do a kind of defining a priority list, prioritization of the whole long list of the requirements. And we call this Moscow, that's a little funny term, which we call the must-have. That means very, very important. And probably which we define must-have. These requirements are essential for the system to operate in any form. So that is the most critical things. That's really define what the system is required. Should have, well, it is not something really what we say, but always better to have it. If there is any difficulty, we'll try to achieve it within the delivery of the project, because it definitely brings some value to the whole system. Could have type of requirements are the kind of a thing which will definitely what we call value-added services. So, in other words, the things where you will be able to convince the client, and also will be able to get the others, the feelings, and they may be very happy to accept the system. So, these requirements could be justified on the business or academic grounds, but are not central to the effectiveness of the system. So, the graphical user interfaces and the things happen, the colors and the customization, so many other features. What to have in the future is the least things which maybe you can put it as there. I mean, necessarily you can come up with a small matrix and you can put I think it goes wrong with the other. I'll take the other mic. It's picking up on a signal from somewhere else, and that's why it's happened. So this is quite natural in this kind of wireless mic when I use it. So if there's a signal, somebody is using another mic somewhere else, it takes that signal. Okay, seems to be no disturbance. Let's follow it. What to have in the future is that you can create a small matrix, and if you can put it into your analysis part, that will really get attractive for especially the reviewers. But not it's something after that, and also weighted mechanism to be created. And of course, in the real software development projects, you know that the cost estimation is done based on this. And the cost estimation is the one which really gives the overall, really what comes, how many times, how many things come. Now here, in the reality projects, we do expect that the student will spend approximately around 100 hours of programming or implementation work. Then in that case, and this 100 hours, we assume that the person is an average good programmer, and then you can decide, okay, this is the amount of the work that we could cover it. Well, then the final slide is this. How I am going to meet the requirements. So this is something you'll have to think about in the design phase, Mr. Kapil has been talked about. So everything is the race well, things, and whether it is scope, whether it is acceptable, whether it is critical, then what is the mechanism, how I am going to plan for remainder of the project. That's the other things where you need to go further up. What technical infrastructure tools am I going to meet? And things people will have to start working on. And are there any changes to objectives of my project arising from my requirements analysis? So remember that nothing is defined. Scope, objectives, and everything will change. Even the design stage, you will have to change things. That's the reality. So nothing is permanent. That rule is there. That principle is there. Things change. But we have to remember based on that changes. In the agile software development, that the whole philosophy is based on that. Things are changing. Requirements cannot be defined as something permanent. Those things change with the cycle, even before delivering the project software product that happens. Okay, so it's time for Q&A, which is most important. So this is not a lecture to teach you the whole requirement analysis, just to do what really we expect from the examination point of view, and start with that.
So the usual, if you have questions, you can ask on the mic or you can pass in chat. So if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I can give you one. Anyone with questions?
Yeah, when it comes to the implementation part, I think this question, what are the success factors for implementing systems? Now, this is going to be answers, but if I say in one word, the success factor, well, it should be a working software. Things should be worked. You should be able to run it from the that's the key factor. There could be a lot of factors that you can define. You can define a set of factors with respect to the client, with respect to you, and also the success, if you really define as a passing the project module, well, that factors will be in a slightly different sense. But this question only for the implementation first. But of course, can we give a functional requirement in a module wise? Functional requirement, employee management, salary, and the basic computation. Well, this is the way how we really go. I mean, once you have all the scope, you roughly identify these are the modules. Okay, these are the modules that may happen in the project, and that is the kind of way of jotting down the scope. So then you define the module. That's the kind of the way of managing the complexity of the system. And then within each module, you identify a set of requirements. And then you see some sort of similar requirements. Of course, that's the way you have to start. You can start at the functional requirements, identify the functions based on the modules. Why? Then try to integrate them and see Sometimes after the analysis you may decide not possible to implement all modules, then you select some of the parts. And also some of the requirements you may not be considered as a part of the scope in the project. Next, what are the main diagrams you expect in analysis? Use case, class, sequence, activity. Do you need much more? Well, this is the way. If you select the object-oriented approach, the most important two things is the use case and the class. You don't try to go to the biggest requirement is what, not how. Remember that, that's the common theme. Never go and decide how things is done, what you really need. So in that case, the main thing is use cases and the class. And again, that is the very high level. Once you go to the design, you will start further go up, down. So the initial, the diagrams, use cases and the class. No need of going to the sequence and activity, but again, there is no rule saying that you should not do. If you want, you can do it. And that will give you a better picture of everything. Because the time management is the other. Next, how to really define the functional and non-functional requirement. Please explain. That is what the functional requirement is already something that you can see, something really happens. Something that is not seen is the non-functional. That's what I said. I am doing a presentation now. The presentation, doing the presentation is the functional requirement. Do it within the 45 minutes is the non-functional requirements, which is not seen but has to be done. So, like that, depending on things. So, this is the start to start. And read the relevant software engineering books and then start. And look at the example, look at the other past projects, and how people have described the functional and non-functional requirements. Next, how to identify the modules properly. This is the challenge. It is not very clear. It's the guess. Within the scope you define, these are the modules. But when you start going further investigation, you may split the modules, you may bring the modules, you may drop the modules. So there is no rule. It's actually what we call investigation. So how to identify the modules is basically based on the related things you have put together. Remember the software engineering principles, cohesion and coupling. So that is actually the key that you have to think about when you identify the relevant modules. So all related things should be in one module. That is what we call the cohesion. And the low coupling is where you have a little communication, but still you need the communication with the modules. Okay. Yes, please go ahead.
Regarding choosing infrastructure, technical infrastructure on the project. So, can you use standalone? It could be a standalone or web-based. So, we can use standalone project.
Okay, it's up to you to decide. But remember one thing: you have to come here and present your project. If it is whatever the infrastructure you selected, if you cannot bring something here and demonstrate, then everything will collapse. Nice project if you cannot demonstrate it for the examiners. So if it is a web-based system, of course that's quite okay. It should be there and it should be able to access from the online environment using the dongle. That's the one thing. Standalone, no problem. But again, that depends on your client's requirements. If the client needs something in the standalone, and if the client doesn't have the internet there, and it's there, so it's up to you to decide and select that.
But at the Viva, he wants the insurance developer standalone system. At the Viva, the PEB expected as a online system. So what is the solution for that?
Who says that?
At the PEB.
PEB there. PEB in project guideline have you
evaluation board.
Project?
Evaluation board.
Project evaluation board or project guideline, we have never said about that you should not do the standalone. Still there are standalone systems that you can do it. But remember the standalone system, you should be able to bring it and show it. And also you have to convince why do you need a standalone system. But if that cannot be done, it is quite hard to do it. You need a justification. Why you use the standalone? It is not because that you want to do it. That should be the requirement. If the client says, okay, this is my requirement, you need to be justified why you need standard or probably then there is a justification, there is no harm. Because in the project guideline, we have never mentioned if there is something is happened, of course, you get complaint later. So there are no some issues like that. Professor Gyan, if you have anything to add for that?
Yeah, I think maybe address that.
That's one in the like yes, talk that there and Professor Gyan talked about it later.
Is that sometimes the integrator might say that the GPO is maybe because of the scope. I don't know whether doing that project standalone system is satisfied the scope. Maybe as a Dr. said, there is no message that you have to do the rotation and go to standard, but you have to make sure that it has enough.
There is one more.
Just discussion. How much of weight needed for each surfaces of the analysis report? Well, there is no guideline or things like that. You should spend this much and that. You are an independent investigator and you are supposed to report that one in a way. You have a limited space for the whole these things. Of course, if there are lots of other things which you cannot report, you can write some detailed report and publish on the web and put the URL or put, if there is a possibility, you can add the appendix. But you have to summarize the things and try to convince what is the most important thing. There is again how much you have to spend, that you have to decide based on the time available, how you really plan for the whole project. So there is no rule or guideline. You will have to decide depending on the problem that you investigate.
There are a couple of requests to host these slides on the LMS, and we will do that. And there is also another question: if it's an e-commerce system, should it be hosted? And the person to the PV need not be hosted. The person to the PV. Yeah. Okay. We take this as the last question.
So, in the evaluation form, it mentioned outline of existing similar solution. So, at that time in the dissertation, what are the information that need to be applied? So, I have seen some previous dissertation, they only say that we are going through these systems and with the knowledge of problems. So, do we need to apply further whatever in that solutions?
This is actually what we say whenever you do the project. It is very important to look at whether there are similar work done before similar project has been done. And there is sometimes some people may have almost said, we have seen the, for example, library systems, then the library system for this library and that library and so many other libraries. So then there are similar systems. So you are supposed to do a background analysis. So the background analysis is not about the problem, but you are trying a similar project. So the basic idea is to see whether a similar work has been done. Then you have to justify how it is going to differ. And of course, if you take the two plans, they may not have exactly the same requirements. There may be a common requirements, but what is different? What's the sort of things that again, probably you could come up with a justification on that one. There is no issue. But if you do a real, genuine work, a real true work, there is no harm or no difficulty in justifying that thing. That's what I believe. Okay, thank you. So then I hand it over to Mr. Kapiladass and Dr. Hakim to continue.